Alien princess was cursed to never touch a male until a human broke it. Long ago, in the age when stars were young, there lived a seer on Valtherus. She was feared by kings and worshipped by commoners, for her visions had never failed. One night, beneath the burning glow of 3 moons, she cast a curse that would stain the royal bloodline for centuries. Her voice carried across the palace halls like thunder. No princess of Valtherus shall ever touch the hand of a male. Should her skin meet his, ruin shall fall. Kingdoms will crumble, and death will follow. The curse was born of vengeance, though time buried the reason. Generations passed, yet the shadow of her words lingered. Princess after princess was adored from afar but never held. They were queens without warmth, heirs without freedom, women trapped in bodies that all feared. When Princess Araya was born, the palace rejoiced. She was radiant even as a child, her silver eyes like liquid moonlight, her hair dark as obsidian stone. The people called her a blessing from the stars, the jewel of Valtherus. But behind the songs and celebrations was the silence of dread. Every cradle song reminded her that she was untouchable. Every gaze upon her beauty was mixed with pity. As the years passed, Araya grew into a woman whose presence commanded every room she entered. She was graceful, wise, and strong in spirit. The council praised her for her discipline. Suitors from distant worlds spoke poems of her beauty, though they dared never stand too close. She wore her crown with dignity, but within her heart lived an ache that words could not soothe. She had never known the warmth of another's hand. She had never felt the closeness of an embrace. To her people, she was a symbol almost divine. To herself, she was a prisoner. Often she walked the high balconies of the palace, staring at the alien skies of Valtherus. The stars stretched forever, yet she felt confined. The curse was not only in her flesh, it was in her destiny. The council reminded her always, "You must never forget what you are. You are the untouchable heir. You are not only a woman, but a living prophecy." Araya bowed to their words, but her soul whispered rebellion. She longed for something she had never tasted. Freedom, choice, a life where her hands were her own. It was on such a night, as the twin suns sank into the horizon and the moons rose like silver lanterns, that fate began to stir. In the skies above Valtherus, the heavens cracked with light. A battle raged in orbit, metal against metal, fire against shadow. Starships clashed in silence above the world, their engines screaming against the void. The people gathered in the courtyards, staring upward as streaks of fire cut across the dark. Among the flaming wreckage, a single vessel broke through, spiraling toward the surface. It was foreign, smaller than their ships, its design strange to Valtherian eyes. The palace guards prepared for impact, their weapons glowing with power. The ship crashed beyond the crystal plains, sending a tremor across the city. Araya watched from her balcony, her silver eyes narrowing. It was not one of their enemies. The design was unknown yet alive. Someone had come from the stars. The council gathered at once, arguing over action. Some demanded destruction, others feared plague or curse. But Araya's heart beat faster, not from fear, but from something she had not felt in years, curiosity. The survivors were brought to the palace. Alien men and women, their uniforms torn, their faces marked with fire and blood. They were human, a race rarely spoken of in Valtherian halls. Among them was a man who stood taller than the rest, his presence steady even in chains. His hair was dark, his eyes sharp with defiance. He did not bow like the others. He met the princess's gaze directly, as if her curse meant nothing. Princess Araya's world, once frozen in silence, shifted in that single moment. And so began the story of the human who would challenge fate. The throne hall of Valtherus was vast, its pillars carved from crystal that shimmered with starlight. Torches burned with blue fire along the walls, casting shifting shadows across the marble floor. The council gathered in a half-circle, their jeweled robes whispering with each movement. At the center sat Princess Araya, her silver eyes fixed upon the strangers who had fallen from the heavens. The humans stood in silence, their hands bound by bands of light. Guards watched their every breath, spears glowing at their sides. The council elder, a withered man named Sereth, lifted his staff and spoke. "These creatures fell from the void, princess. They are soldiers of another war. They bring danger with them. We must dispose of them before their curse infects our world." The humans shifted uneasily at the words, though they understood little of the alien tongue. Only one among them stepped forward. His chains rattled, yet his shoulders remained square. His voice was firm, though marked with exhaustion. "We are not your enemies. Our ship was attacked. We were forced to land here. We seek only safety." The translator sphere beside the throne pulsed, echoing his words into the Valtherian language. Murmurs rippled through the council. Araya studied him quietly, her expression unreadable. "What is your name?" she asked, her voice calm, yet carrying across the hall like a melody that silenced all others. The man raised his chin. "Lieutenant James Carter of Earth." The name was strange to Valtherian ears, yet it carried a weight of certainty. Araya felt a spark of something she could not name. He did not tremble. He did not avert his eyes. For the first time in her life, someone looked at her not as a cursed heir, but as a woman. Sereth slammed his staff against the floor. "This insolence must not be allowed. Princess, you must not stand so near. Remember the curse. If his flesh should touch yours, ruin will fall upon us all." The hall grew tense, fear filling the air like smoke. Even the guards shifted uneasily, their grips tightening on their spears. But James did not falter. His gaze never left hers. Araya leaned slightly forward, her voice lowering. "Do you not fear death, human? You stand before a princess cursed by the stars. To touch me is to invite destruction." James's lips curved into the faintest smile. His voice was steady, almost defiant. "I do not believe in fate." The words hung in the air like fire. The council gasped in outrage. Some shouted for his execution, others for his removal. But Araya's eyes widened, just slightly. No one had ever spoken to her so boldly. No one had ever dared to dismiss the curse. The council argued into the night, but Araya's decision was final. Against Sereth's protests, she ordered the humans be housed within the palace walls until judgment could be passed. The council feared her choice, but they could not defy her word. As the guards led James away, he glanced back at her. Not in arrogance, but with something sharper, something that cut deeper than any blade. A promise that he was not afraid of her, that he saw her not as a prophecy, but as a person. That night, as the twin moons lit the palace towers, Princess Araya stood alone on her balcony once more. The wind tugged at her hair, and her thoughts circled endlessly. The human's words echoed in her mind. "I do not believe in fate." And for the first time in her life, she wondered if perhaps fate did not believe in him either. The palace of Valtherus was unlike anything James had ever seen. Its towers were spun from crystal, its halls alive with glowing vines that pulsed softly, like the heartbeat of the world itself. Servants and guards walked in silence, always stealing wary glances at him as if expecting some invisible curse to strike at any moment. Yet James carried himself with calm certainty, never lowering his head, never showing fear. Araya watched him from afar in those first days. She told herself it was duty, that she must understand the stranger who had fallen into her world. But her eyes lingered longer than they should have, and she found herself listening for his voice in the halls. The other humans kept to their quarters, speaking quietly, grateful for safety. James, however, seemed restless. He often wandered the gardens, staring at the alien skies as though searching for something beyond them. One night, drawn by curiosity she could not deny, Araya found him in the starlit gardens. He stood by the fountain of singing water, his eyes on the twin moons above. "You should not be here without guards," she said, her voice gentle yet carrying a note of warning. James turned, and in the silver glow of the moons, his face seemed carved from iron and fire. "I do not think your people fear for my safety," he replied. Her lips curved in the faintest smile. No, they fear for mine. For a moment, silence stretched between them, heavy and alive. Then James spoke again, his voice quieter. I grew up near an ocean, endless waves rolling forever. At night, the sky and the water became one. When I was a boy, I thought if I swam far enough, I could touch the stars. Araya's heart tightened. She had never seen an ocean, only heard tales of such vast water. And did you ever try? He gave a short laugh. Of course. I nearly drowned. My mother pulled me out, scolded me until I could not breathe, then held me tighter than ever. That was Earth. Messy, painful, beautiful. Freedom even in failure. His words struck her like a blade of light. She looked at the fountains, at the vines, at the glowing palace walls. Her home was perfect, orderly, and cold. I envy you, she whispered. To fall, to fail, to be held. I have never known such things. James studied her, his gaze deep but not pitying. Because of this curse? Araya nodded slowly. Every day of my life. Even now, as I stand before you, the council watches from the shadows, waiting for disaster. I am a symbol, James. Not a woman. A symbol carved by fear. James stepped closer, not enough to touch, but enough for the air between them to tremble. Then perhaps it is time someone saw you as more than that. Her breath caught, and for a heartbeat she forgot the curse, forgot the council, forgot the weight of centuries. But the moment passed, and she pulled herself back into composure. Careful, human. Words are as dangerous as blades in this palace. The very next day, whispers spread. Servants spoke of the princess seen in the gardens with the foreign soldier. The council seethed. Sereth confronted her with fury in his eyes. You endanger us all, princess. Already the people whisper. They say the human has charmed you. If he so much as brushes your hand, our kingdom is doomed. Araya held her ground, her voice like steel. And if the curse is nothing but fear kept alive by men who would chain me to silence? What then, Sereth? The elder's face darkened. You risk everything for a fleeting fancy. He must be removed. But James remained. Though the council's eyes followed him with suspicion, Araya's word was law, and she did not bend. Night after night, she found him again. They spoke of earth, of oceans and storms, of songs sung by soldiers at campfires. In turn, she told him of Valtherus, of the moons that guided lovers, of the stars that her ancestors once claimed as their own. The more they spoke, the more the air between them changed. What began as curiosity grew into something sharper. Glances lingered, words softened. The ache in Araya's heart deepened, no longer the ache of loneliness, but of longing. Yet each time her hand trembled near his, she stopped herself. The curse hung between them like a wall of fire. Neither dared to cross it. But the palace was not blind. Servants whispered. Guards muttered. The council sharpened their plans. And somewhere deep in the shadows of Valtherus, unseen eyes watched them with growing hatred. The palace of Valtherus stood like a jewel in the night, but inside its glittering halls, unease festered. The council convened in secrecy, their voices sharp as knives. Elder Sereth struck his staff against the floor with each word. The human has poisoned her thoughts. She defies us. She questions the curse. If this bond continues, she may destroy the very foundation of our rule. Another counselor leaned forward, her jeweled fingers tapping the table. The people whisper already. Some say it is destiny. Others believe the human is a test from the stars. If the princess takes his hand, and disaster does not fall, our authority will crumble. Fear clung to their voices, but behind that fear lay ambition. The curse had long served the council, for it bound the princess to obedience. An untouchable heir was easy to control. A free woman was not. Meanwhile, James walked the palace corridors with cautious steps, sensing the eyes that watched him from every corner. He had survived war and betrayal before, and he recognized the sharp smell of conspiracy. Something moved in the shadows of Valtherus, something older and darker than the council itself. He spoke to Araya in hushed tones during their nightly meetings. They will not sit idle forever. I have seen that look in men before. It is the look of those who fear losing power. Araya's silver eyes darkened. The council has ruled for centuries, hidden behind the prophecy. If you are right, they would rather see me chained by fear than free by truth. Her words cut her as much as they freed her. She wanted to believe in James, in the courage she saw in his eyes. But the curse loomed like an invisible storm. What if Sereth was right? What if a single touch brought ruin? Could she risk her people's lives for the longing in her heart? The answer came not from her, but from fate. One evening, as the palace dined beneath the glowing chandeliers, a servant slipped poison into the wine cup meant for James. He lifted it to his lips, but Araya's voice cut through the hall. "Stop!" Every eye turned to her. She rose from her seat, her gown flowing like liquid starlight. "Do not drink." James set the cup down slowly, his eyes narrowing. The council shifted uncomfortably, and Sereth masked his fury with a smile. But Araya's gaze was sharp as a blade. She had seen the tremor in the servant's hands, the flicker of fear in his eyes. That night, alone in the garden, she confessed the truth. "They want you gone. They will not stop until you are. You have placed yourself in danger by staying near me." James shook his head. "If I leave, they win. And if I stay, perhaps I can help you break free." Her voice wavered. "And if the curse is real? If my touch destroys you?" He stepped closer, his words quiet but firm. "Then let it destroy me. Better to die reaching for what matters than to live forever in fear." Araya's breath caught. For a moment, she almost raised her hand. Almost. But the weight of centuries pressed it down. Days turned into nights, and the palace grew colder. Whispers turned into open accusations. "The princess is bewitched," the council declared. "The human weakens her resolve." Some of the people believed, some doubted, and others began to hope. But in the shadows beyond the council, darker forces moved. Assassins were called, blades sharpened, poisons brewed. The curse, once a legend, had become a weapon in the hands of those who feared change. And in the middle of it all stood Araya, torn between the chains of prophecy and the fire in her heart. The wall between her and James had never felt higher. Yet never had her longing burned so fiercely. The night of betrayal came beneath skies heavy with storm clouds. Lightning tore across the heavens, throwing sharp shadows over the palace walls. The people of Valtherus slept, unaware that their future trembled on the edge of a blade. Araya walked alone through the quiet halls, her mind restless. James's words haunted her. Better to die reaching for what matters than to live forever in fear. She touched the cold stone of the palace wall, wishing for the warmth of a hand she had never known. She did not hear the assassins until it was too late. Figures cloaked in black shadows slipped from the darkness, their blades whispering through the air. Eyes like burning coals fixed on her, merciless and cold. Araya's breath caught as steel arced toward her. But before the blade could strike, a figure surged from the shadows. James. His body slammed into hers, knocking her aside. Pain flashed in his eyes as the assassin's blade pierced deep into his chest. The hall filled with chaos. Guards clashed with assassins, steel against steel, cries echoing against the crystal walls. But Araya saw none of it. Her gaze was fixed on James as he fell to his knees, blood staining the marble floor beneath him. "James!" Her voice broke with a sound she had never heard from herself before. She rushed to him, her heart tearing in her chest. He struggled to breathe, his hand pressing against the wound. Yet when his eyes met hers, there was no fear, only the same steady fire she had seen since the day they met. "Do not let them win," he whispered. Tears blurred her vision. The council's warnings thundered in her mind. "Do not touch. Do not hold. Ruin will fall." But ruin had already come. And if this was the end, she would not let him die alone. She reached for him. Her hands trembled as they cradled his face, his body. For the first time in her life, her skin met that of a man. Warmth. Fragile, fleeting warmth. She held him close, expecting death to strike her down, expecting the curse to burn them both. But what came was not ruin. A golden radiance burst from her hands, flowing into James's wound, filling the hall with blinding light. The assassins froze, shields of shadow cracking under the brilliance. The guards shielded their eyes as the palace shook with power. Araya gasped as the light surged through her. Not pain but release. Centuries of chains shattered in an instant. The weight of the seer's curse fell away like dust. She felt it break, not with fear, but with love. James's breath steadied. The wound closed before her eyes, the blood fading as though it had never been. His chest rose and fell with strength once more. And when his eyes opened, they burned with life. The assassins, blinded and broken, fell to the guards. The council stormed into the hall, their faces pale with terror. They had seen it, the curse undone, the prophecy shattered. Araya stood, her hand still gripping James's. For the first time, she did not let go. Her voice rang through the hall, clear and commanding. The curse is no more. You told us to live in fear, but fear has ended tonight. Valtherus is free. The council fell silent. The people, drawn from their sleep by the golden light, filled the palace steps, their voices rising in awe. They had seen their princess, once untouchable, now holding the hand of the human who had defied fate. And in that moment the old world ended. Dawn broke over Valtherus, painting the crystal towers in gold and rose. The night of blood and fire had passed, leaving behind silence, heavy and sacred. But it was not the silence of fear. It was the silence of wonder. The people gathered in the palace courtyard, their eyes lifted to the balcony where their princess now stood. At her side was James, his uniform torn, his face marked with battle, yet his presence unshaken. Their hands were joined, not in secrecy, but openly, boldly, before the world. For centuries the curse had ruled them. For centuries the princesses of Valtherus had been worshipped but never touched, loved but never held. Now the chains were broken, and all had witnessed the truth. The seer's prophecy had not been eternal. It had only waited for someone brave enough to challenge it. Araya's voice carried across the crowd, strong and steady. My people, for too long you have been taught to live in fear of fate. But fate is not chains. It is choice. I was told my touch would bring ruin. Yet when I chose to hold this man, the curse was undone. The truth is this: love is not our doom. Love is our salvation. The people erupted in cries of joy, in tears, in hope. They called her name not as a cursed heir, but as a woman reborn. Araya felt their voices rise through her, stronger than any council decree, stronger than any prophecy. The council stood in silence, their power crumbling in the light of the truth. Sereth bowed his head, his voice bitter but resigned. The prophecy is ended. The council yields. James turned to her, his voice quiet enough for only her to hear. So, what happens now? Araya's silver eyes softened, her lips curving with a smile that was both tender and fierce. Now we live, not as symbols, not as prisoners, but as ourselves. Together they stepped down from the balcony into the waiting crowd. Hands reached toward them, not in worship, but in celebration. Araya felt their warmth, their trust, their hope, and for the first time in her life, she embraced it without fear. That evening, as the twin moons rose, Araya and James walked beyond the palace walls, hand in hand. The crystal plains shimmered beneath the alien skies, endless and free. Once her hands had been a prison. Now they were her strength. The stars above blazed brighter than she had ever seen, as though the heavens themselves rejoiced. And beneath them, two figures walked side by side, once forbidden, now eternal. The curse was broken. Love had won. And the future of Valtherus began that night, not with fear, but with freedom.